New faces at One Bills Drive. Injuries still an issue, and oh, yes. What looks to be one of the biggest games of the year for the Bills, and we all knew it was coming in a trip to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals once again. I'm Kevin Carroll. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone Podcast.
And I'm Jon Scott. I'm ready for some Skyline chili, Kevin. It's Skyline time.
John's so excited he didn't feel like coming in and sitting next to me today. He'll stay home so he can get a jump on heading to Cincy to get that Skyline chili, John. But, oh my God, big news on a Wednesday before the Bills' big game against Cincinnati. Bills quarterback Josh Allen not practicing. We all knew he banged up his shoulder in the win over the Buccaneers back on Thursday night. He finished that game, John, but not practicing on a Wednesday. Still, how concerning is this actually at this point?
According to Josh Allen, not that concerning, says he feels better than he did after the game. If it was a game, he would have played. If it was a practice that he had to practice in, he would have, but that this is part of the plan. And he mentioned soreness a few times when asked by reporters about the decision not to in the state of his shoulder. And he said it's so he's not super sore going into the week. So it's management is really what it comes down to. And you see it with all sorts of guys in terms of managing them. Leonard Floyd, for a period of time when he was dealing with an ankle injury, he didn't practice a lot during the week. You see that with Jordan Poyer a year ago as he was dealing with some injuries here. It's all about the game. And yes, for game planning purposes and just to be ready, you want to have guys practicing. But as of Wednesday, there's other days that he will get out there. Allen said he hoped that he will get out there on Thursday. That's the expectation. And we move forward that there's really no concern or even up in the air about his status for Sunday night in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I agree with you. The only concern is that it is his throwing shoulder and, maybe concern during the game. But we saw how he finished out the Buccaneers game, even after the injury, still able to sling it around. Allen was supposed to be limited, John. The Bills injury report came out, said he did not practice. Another guy that did not practice, Rasul Douglas, the cornerback coming over from the Buccaneers in a trade. He was listed as, I believe off the top of my head, just arrived was his injury designation for the injury report or why he didn't practice. But that was the big move the Bills made at the trade deadline. And you and I have talked about the concerns on the Bills defense, and cornerback was one of them we kept bringing up. With injuries, with a player underperforming. We'll get to all this right now. But overall, when I heard on my way home from work that that's what the Bills ended up doing, and when you did your research and learned a little bit more about this guy, pretty good move by the Bills and a pretty good pickup right now.
Just got here was what his injury was listed as. DNP with just got here. I texted Bill's PR and said, bravo. Bravo. It's maybe the best injury designation note that I have seen in my career of looking at injury reports. Really funny stuff. I got some video, I know Andy Young did as well, of Douglas getting out onto the field, meeting some of his teammates in the middle of the media portion, early portion of practice on Wednesday. Brandon Beane making note that it's not easy to find flights from Green Bay to Buffalo, especially direct. So I know some people think maybe Terry Pagula should have thought to send a private jet or something. I just don't think that's how this always works in the realm of the trading world across the NFL. So Douglas in town, but you're right. It fills a need. Do I think Dane Jackson and Christian Benford were fine? Yeah, I think it was good enough. I think the bigger issue was we've gotten glimpses of what's behind that, and you don't necessarily feel great. We saw that the Bills got incredibly depleted a year ago at the cornerback position. Here it happened once again, as it wasn't just Tre'Davious White. Benford and Jackson both dinged up and missing time since the Tre'Davious White injury. And we see what Kyer Elam is, Jamarcus Ingram, Josh Norman, whomever. So I think it's as much of Douglas coming in and being one of the two starters as much as it is than slotting someone you would imagine like Dane Jackson back into that next man up role. Douglas, instinctual. That's what Brandon Beane really hammered home, that his instincts and ability to have a nose for the football were the great traits that he was looking for, and that drew him to Rasul Douglas. The guy, Kevin, has 15 career interceptions, 2 in Philadelphia's first year, 3, none in Philadelphia his third year in the league. Carolina, he had none. But then he gets to Green Bay, and Brandon Beane said that's kind of where it clicked. 5 interceptions in 21, 4 interceptions in 22, and he already has 1 interception here in 2023. I think that on top of what we saw other people mention, and then Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane, just the character, the leadership that he brings. McDermott quantifying it and saying it's kind of tough for a new guy to be a leader because they're getting their feet wet trying to learn things. You got to prove yourself. But it seems like this fits the now, the later, the character, the football. It kind of fits everything that the Bills look for in a player.
Yeah, instinctive and leadership. When I heard Brandon Beane's press conference is what I took out of it. And, I mean, Dane Jackson, he's been around a while, but the rest of that cornerback room, John, is still very young, especially with Tre'Davious White not there in the room. So you bring in a guy, if you checked out what Packers players were saying on Twitter, or I think I saw something else from another player that Douglas had played with at one point in his career on the leadership that this guy has and how good he is and how great of a person he is. And it just comes off as this is the mold of a guy that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott like to have in on this team.
They also don't mind having long, rangy guys. That's something I think when they drafted Akira Elam, when they brought in Xavier Rhodes, bigger, longer corner, 6'2", 210 or so, 205. That's what you got here out of Rasul Douglas. And we know what length can do. Maybe he's not, as he's 28, 29, the same athlete he was when he entered the league in 2017, or the same athlete as a Kyrie Elam or Benford or whomever. But when you have that length, that really adds so much to it. So I think from a physical standpoint, he hits the nail on the head. I think from a football standpoint, a leadership standpoint, and Kevin, I think from a contract standpoint, this also brings another question of he solidifies the now, but even though the cap number is something people have noted, I think it can be manipulated. But Brandon Beane acquiring a guy that's not a rental, he has term for next season as well, which I think also played a pretty big role in this decision as well.
So for the now, John, we look at how this affects this season. You have Tre'Davious White working his way back from an Achilles injury. A player beloved in the area, loved in the locker room there. But, I've seen things out there that if this works out, this could mean that they might be maybe possibly moving on from Tre'Davious White, who's now had season-ending injuries twice or missed a big chunk of time over the last 3 years. I'll put it that way.
It's weird. I don't know what to think of it in terms of the future, because all I was really focused is it's an Achilles injury. It takes at least a year. So now the Bills, in all likelihood, aren't going to have Tre'Davious White back onto the field till maybe midway of 2024. Then some people started talking about there's a potential out before next season to get out of his contract. Spot Track saying that if they did it as a post June 1st cut, be 6.2 dead cap in 24. Or if they did it before June 1st, it's 10 million dead cap, 6 million or so savings. If they waited, they could distribute the dead cap money and save over 10 million if they did it after June next year. It's just tough. He's such a vocal guy. You talk about being a cutthroat business decision. That's exactly what that is what that would be. I don't know if the Bills are in that business.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest with you, I think it'd be one heck of a precedent to show that you cut a guy loose rehabbing from an Achilles, who was the first person that Sean McDermott brought in. That was his first decision. Brandon Beane was not the general manager who drafted him. It was a Sean McDermott pick. He's been a key part of it. I don't know if we get there. And it's a conversation that I think we'll have more in the offseason. For me, this is more of a Rasul Douglas can be the number one corner now, and you at least have him to start next season. That leaves you have Christian Benford. Dane Jackson, I believe, will be a free agent again after this season. What does it mean? It kind of softens the load and urgency of the cornerback position entering 2024. They're still going to make and need to make additions, but I think that this was a move that I think he was looking for. Brandon Beane being beyond 23, the instant help, but also a guy that is high caliber enough and can fit contract wise to where, okay, if Trey doesn't make it back, or if Trey makes it back, and he's not gonna be Trey, even whenever he makes it back, just like a year ago, you have some protection in that way.
Something tells me we'll be talking about cornerback 2 come June and July once again.
Honestly, I think you may be talking about cornerback 1, Kevin. I think that's maybe where the conversation shifts, is maybe after 2 serious injuries and not knowing where he's at, and Trey will be, I think, approaching late 20s, early 30. Maybe Tre'Davious White can no longer be expected to be a number one cornerback. And Rasul Douglas will kind of be the guy that can carry it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think off-season, cornerback 1 is what they're going to be maybe in search for.
Okay. Back to the here and now. Douglas seems to fit well in Sean McDermott's scheme. Kaiir Elam, John, former first-round pick, of course affected by this. He's been a healthy scratch a lot throughout the beginning part of the season anyways. I thought personally that he would be moved by the trade deadline. That ultimately did not happen. Brandon Beane, speaking to the media, seems like they haven't exactly lost faith in Elam, but I don't know if that's just words coming out of Beane's mouth. But he did bring up that there's a possibility of them just shutting him down right now and putting him on IR, which kind of took me by surprise. I don't know if it took you by surprise, but I didn't think he was banged up that much that they would do that. But then Beane kind of pointed out that they can do that because it's just 4 weeks now.
I think there's a couple reasons for it. He's been listed on the injury report with an ankle. So as Beane noted, he's been inactive 5 of the 8 games. Maybe they weren't actually healthy scratches. He's been fighting through an ankle injury. And to me, I think if they put him on IR, it's for roster manipulation. I think it's maybe to have him take a step back and without the pressures of, is he going to be active? Is he not going to be active? Just take a step back and reset. And that's something we've kind of heard of, taking a reset with Kaiir. And then you try to salvage this thing. I'll tell you this. Ever since Josh Norman was brought to the practice squad, oftentimes I see Kaiir Elam right next to Josh Norman, Christian Benford as well. You talked about the veteran presence and a veteran like Rasul Douglas and what he can do for a young room. I think now you add Josh Norman and you add Douglas into the mix. I think maybe they hope that it can click. And even Beane mentioned Josh Norman. He said the first couple of years he wasn't the player that Josh Norman ultimately became. And then it hit. And I think Brandon Beane is always going to go back to Wyatt Teller. Not every case is the same, but I think he's always going to have that in the back of his mind, and maybe a little hesitation to give up on a young player, particularly a high draft pick, which Teller was not, but a young player that they see some promise in, and extend things as long as they can to try to see if that player can figure it out and they could reap the rewards of their selection. Our Matt Perino's put it out there and said, our friend Matt Perino, not ours, that reiterating that they didn't get, people inquired, but the Bills politely declined. Like, they were not looking to move him. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think depending upon the price, I would be willing to cut bait. but it doesn't appear the Bills are at this point.
Yeah, very interesting there. Meantime, Leonard Floyd signed to the practice squad. He was free agent. This isn't a trade deadline move. Free agent coming in at the trade deadline on the practice squad. The running back with some very good years in Jacksonville, some decent years with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, won a Super Bowl ring with the Buccaneers, was reportedly signing with the Bills a week and a half ago or so. Then that fell through, and then ultimately he ends up doing that and is now at least on the practice squad, John. We know that he can be elevated a few times before they actually have to sign him. This to me says Damian Harris is probably done for the year, or maybe that's what they're looking at. But again, another veteran presence to come in on the Bills as they make this push for what I'll call the second half of the season. I know there's one more game now, but we've had 8 games already. So brought in to kind of have that veteran running back in the locker room.
I agree with you in terms of Damian Harris. I think this is an indicator that he's not coming back anytime soon, if at all, this season. And then I think it shifts to maybe where the team sees Latavius Murray. And good story when it started. And I think he's had some good moments. He's been getting starts and seeing decent time over the past few weeks here. I think maybe they're looking for a little something else here, but I'll temper maybe the expectations or paint a better timeline for people. Fournette saying after practice today when we spoke with him, in terms of getting a grasp on the playbook, he says the running game, I don't know, 2 to 4 weeks is the picture he painted. And then like passing, catching the ball, which is what I think some people expect him maybe to be a key in here. He said that's going to take a little longer because it's different terminology and it's complex. If you remember, Kevin, the Bills acquired a running back at this time a year ago at the trading deadline, Nyheim Hines. He was a non-factor in this offense. Brandon Beane even noted after the season he wished he was more involved. But in my conversations with Hines, he was open about the challenges it was to pick up the playbook. There were extenuating circumstances, the snow game, and other things, the way the schedule was working, that didn't allow him the legit normal practices to get fully acclimated and help him with that. But this is not something that I think anyone should expect. Leonard Floyd's on the practice squad, Leonard Fournette is on the practice squad, and he's just in a matter of weeks going to come in and be an impact guy. Mm-hmm. I don't foresee it. Maybe it's more of a back end of the season type thing of, all right, we'll be fine now. Get us to the bye week. We get this 4-game stretch, get us to the bye week, and by that point, it'll be 5-6 weeks. Fournette should have a good enough grasp to be someone that could be a complementary piece to James Cook should we need it.
If you don't know the answer to this, it's no big deal. But I recall the Bills a few years ago getting a running back with a pretty decent name and a pretty decent reputation around the league on the practice squad, but he never saw the light of day and was gone at the end of the year. Do you remember that? Do you know who I'm talking about? I vaguely remember
Dante
that.
Foreman?
Maybe that's what I'm thinking.
I think there was somebody else. But I mean,
I guess my question to you is, you don't see this as something like that as just having a body there. Do you see Fournette later on in the season actually having a defined role on the team? That's my question.
I think my expectations and belief of what Leonard Fournette is going to be for the Bills is different than what others do. I think if Harris is not someone who's able to come back, then yeah, I could see him maybe ultimately being elevated instead of Ty Johnson as the third running back on the team. Maybe he gets carries over Latavius Murray as the season rolls along. Maybe. Do I think he's someone that's really going to move the needle? I don't know. I mean, Kevin, you've seen Leonard Fournette the past couple of years. He had the one good year, the good run with Tampa when they won the Super Bowl. I don't know, last season, 3.5 yards a carry. played 16 games, started 9 of them, 668, 3 touchdowns. I don't really know what to expect here.
Yeah, I don't remember him much, if at all, for the Buccaneers from last season. Season before that, of course, the Bills went down there and played them. So, yeah, that was the year the Buccaneers won. Or was that the year after? Was that last year? Oh, my God.
2 years ago, Brady was playing.
Yeah, I'm all over the map right now. But, yeah, so I think you and I are in agreement, and we'll see how this all ultimately plays out, John. For, the first day with these guys around, okay, out there a little concerned because, Fournette had a scuffle with Shaq Lawson. We all saw making the rounds Josh Allen talking trash to Douglas. But now everyone's teammates. You got to play nice. And it looks like that's a fun story going into this. It's fun to point out, John. But, I mean, this is the NFL. This is a business. These guys coming in, they're there to do their job and bury the hatchet.
Yeah, it's funny. Fournette laughed. He said he didn't see Shaq until they met the training together down in Florida. I mean, there's so many guys in Florida. Years later, I think it was last year, and they kind of joked about it. And Shaq claims that he won. Fournette claims that he won. Just kind of chopping it up. And as we know, Shaq, he's funny as heck. So I mean, he's going to be boisterous about it. And the guys seem to be fine. I mean, it's competition. Same goes with Rasul Douglas and Josh Allen, seen on the NFL 100 how saying he bleeping stinks a year ago when they played on
sucks.
Sunday
He said
Night
he
Football.
sucks.
Yeah, there you go. So I think these are just, honestly, these are things that like you could just laugh at this point in time. Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine Damian Harris is a really nice guy. I can only imagine what some of the things between Patriots and Bills have also been said over the years. So it's just the way it goes. But you're right. It is funny. The Fournette versus the Bills and Shaq Lawson thing is pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, you and I got into an argument once and didn't talk to each other for a day, and then everything worked itself out. Let's be grown-ups about this whole thing. You know what I mean? You mentioned Shaq Lawson. Interesting comment from Brandon Bean that they're still looking for help possibly on that defensive line, which, can raise a few eyebrows. There's been some names thrown out there, John.
I mean, it's interesting that he was so forthcoming about that, saying he hardcore looked into defensive tackle and maybe something still could happen. That's a spot that when these injuries happen, I've thought that defensive tackle was their deepest spot. Maybe that says what they maybe feel they're getting out of Poona Ford, maybe what they're getting out of Tim Settle and even Jordan Phillips. So you said there's names out there. I've been too busy doing other things to examine what those names could potentially be. The way Brandon Bean kind of teed it up, maybe we won't have to wait long for a resolution or move to be made at that spot for the Bills through the free agent market.
Yeah, it seems like it. Let's get to the game, John. Of course, history here. This game is going to be in Cincinnati once again, and you can't even remotely think of that without thinking of what happened last January with Damar Hamlin collapsing on the field, and this will be the team's first time back playing a game on that field since he was revived on the field, taken away on an ambulance, and then those, touch and go few days surrounding what the future held for the Bills' safety.
It's going to be unique, as the entire situation is surrounding what happened with Damar Hamlin. It'll be interesting. I don't even know how I'm going to respond walking into that stadium and being on the field before the game and just thinking about everything that transpired less than a year ago. I mean, it was in January. We're almost, it'll be 10 months tomorrow when we're taping this, January 2nd. So it's crazy. And there's a lot of layers, and the Bills are trying to say, and I firmly believe that the message is this is what we want to do is, all right, Damar's healthy. This is a football game. That's all it is. That's all we're going to focus on. There's going to be a lot of outside noise about the return, but we have to focus on keeping it a football game. But other people, Brandon Beane included, we're human. Everyone's human. So there's the Damar element. What's Damar going to feel going back there? What's Damar going to think being on that field again, active or inactive, which he's been at points throughout this season? To me, it's what do the players think? Oh my gosh, do you remember what was there? The coaching staff, the training staff, Denny Kellington going there saying, oh my gosh, I revived someone's life over there on that yard line. I think it's going to be emotional for everyone. Dawson Knox said he thinks maybe because of where Damar is, it'll be an emotional high and allow guys to kind of rally around that. But I don't know. Emotional is going to be it. How exactly that sways things and how everyone handles that, I think is going to be an interesting thing to see.
Yeah, it will be a storyline going into the game. And, I mean, ultimately, as far as Damar goes, I mean, we'll see what happens on game day with that. The other part of this, John, is a rematch with a team that knocked the Bills out of the playoffs last year, a game in which the offense looked like we've seen at times this year. So that's concerning going into this because, I mean, Stephon Diggs, that's when he tried to storm off the field before talking to the coaches or whatever was going on in the locker room. The offense, that was it where they looked off. They came back and started this year, looked good. Well, not against the Jets, but looked good for a while. And then the offense had trouble moving the ball and stuff and looked like that team that the Bengals smacked around last January. So I think there is an element there. You know, the Bills want to go in and get some revenge. We've seen, you know, them do that to the Chiefs a few times after the Chiefs knocked them out of the playoffs, go to Kansas City and win a game. But just with how this season has started in the last few months with the Bills offense, you know, we got to see more of what we saw at the beginning of Thursday night, because despite the fact that the Buccaneers had a chance to ultimately or came back in that game, I thought the Bills offense looked right and the formula was right and they were able to attack and move the ball at will for most of the game. And so the recipe is there, John. You got the revenge. You got the offense back to where they should be. But there's always that thought creeping in the back of your mind that they'll just fall back to how they were playing a few weeks ago and how they played at the end of last season.
I think grand scheme, this is huge. The outcome of this game is huge for the Buffalo Bills. It's huge simply from a standings standpoint. The Bills are 5-3. The AFC is loaded. Miami has a big one against Kansas City. So maybe you don't lose a step up with them, but you could also gain one by beating the Cincinnati Bengals. You're looking at, if you don't win the division, slotting for the wild card and even making it. I mean, it's not do or die by any means, but I think it's critical in terms of even just thinking making the playoffs. On top of it, if you want to go even bigger than that, you nailed it. This is where they were with the Chiefs a few years ago when they couldn't beat them. They couldn't beat them in that wacky Monday night game. They couldn't beat them because they let them run the ball. They just played them a couple times. They get spanked around in the playoffs a couple times. That's where it was, even though it hasn't ultimately mattered when they've met in the postseason, they've beaten the Chiefs now twice in the regular season. So it's there. You can beat the Chiefs if things go the right way. You don't have a coin flip or a wacky just meltdown 13 seconds or whatever. The Bills can run with them. That's been proven. I have not seen them show that they can run with the Bengals. It was one quarter-ish before Damar Hamlin
I was going to say that.
Got hurt.
Yes.
But they looked like they were really in trouble against that team, especially defensively. And then you fast forward to the playoff game, and whether they were gassed emotionally, physically, whatever, they got boat raced. It's the worst I've seen the Buffalo Bills play in years in a full game. Just nobody did anything well. And so at this point in time, in a year's stretch, I think the team that's made the AFC Championship in back-to-back years and went to this Super Bowl and nearly won it, I think it's the Chiefs and the Bengals, and the Bills need to prove by beating Cincinnati that they deserve to still be in that conversation So it doesn't mean that they can't accomplish all of their goals if they lose Sunday night against Cincinnati. But to me, I think it's a big one to show that while maybe still flawed, they are still in that conversation and can hang with this team and win.
Yeah, right now this is the biggest game of the season, John. And the two teams kind of started going in opposite direction, but then the Bills kind of right the ship because the Bengals started off struggling. Joe Burrow had a calf injury, and the whole offense and the whole team looked kind of out of sync, John. But now they've won 3 straight games, and Joe Burrow is looking more like Joe Burrow.
100%. The calf injury, he didn't miss any time. But week 1, 14 of 31, 82 yards, looked terrible. Next week, 27 of 41, but 222, 26 of 49, 259, 20 of 30 for 165. I mean, he didn't look good. And he couldn't move around, and the Bengals offense was bogged down. They're scoring 3 points, 24-19, 3. I mean, they looked bad. And then since then, I think Burrow has looked better. The offense is running more efficiently. The Seattle game was still close, and Burrow, the numbers weren't great, and they struggled a little bit. They looked sensational against San Francisco, which, the talent San Francisco has defensively in particular, but San Francisco hasn't looked like San Francisco the past couple of weeks, so how much do you really gauge that in terms of Cincinnati's back? That seems to be the prevailing thought. I think the Bengals are still flawed. I think for whatever reason, they're not humming like the Bills, like you feel they should with the talent that's been there and shown that they can operate in that capacity. So it's going to be really intriguing to me, but at least from the Joe Burrow standpoint, health-wise, he was even scrambling more this past game. He got out there 6 for 43 against San Francisco, including a 20-yard run. I don't think the calf's a problem anymore. So I think they're going to have the full arsenal of Joe Burrow on display and something they're going to have to try to contain.
Now, we don't get to sit around and watch the NFL much on a Sunday because of our job. So really this past Sunday with the Bills off, first time I was actually checking out games. In the 49ers-Bengals game, I noticed more of the three-headed monster at wide receiver that the Bengals have, that the Bills had issues with in that playoff game a year ago. And it looked like to me, the limited part I saw of the game, that they're starting to all get on the same page again at this point of the season.
I mean, Jamar Chase is a monster. He's a monster. And you look at his numbers as Joe Burrow has seemingly become healthier. 12 targets, 10 for 100 and a touchdown against San Francisco, 6 for 80 against Seattle, 15 for 192 and 3 touchdowns against Arizona. Those are the last 3 games. Tyler Boyd, just a steady hand, which is what you want from a third option. I'll tell you this from looking at the numbers. I'll tell you this from having him on a fantasy team.
Oh, boy.
T. Higgins has had a weird year. He's not really been in the fold much in terms of production. Week 1, 8 targets, no receptions. Then he bounces back, 8 for 89, 2 touchdowns, and 12 targets in week 2. But then 8 targets, 2 catches for 21 yards, week 3. 4 targets, 2 for 19 in week 4. Inactive because he was hurt week 5. Then you go 4 targets, 2 for 20. And then even last week, 5 for 69. Like, T. Higgins is, when you talk about, Gabe Davis needs to be a number 2 like T. Higgins. Well, Gabe Davis's numbers are better than those T. Higgins numbers. So to me, it's been interesting that while maybe the offense is rounding into form and Burrow's looking better and that's, affecting things and helping things with Jamar Chase, to me, Tyler Boyd, while he's not popping off the charts here with these monster numbers, he's been more of a consistent option for Joe Burrow than T. Higgins to this point. Doesn't mean it can't happen and won't happen and he's not going to be a threat. But T. Higgins has not been T. Higgins in this contract here.
Before we move on to the game itself, Bills' run defense has come up throughout the start of this season. And Joe Mixon, at least numbers-wise to me, looks like he's having a pretty decent season, and that might pose a problem for the Bills' defense.
talk about steady. It's interesting because Mixon, he doesn't have a 100-yard game. He only has 2 games over 80 yards this season. He's averaging 4 yards a carry, but the guy he grinds it out. He has a 13, 13, 19, 14, 25, 12, 16. Like those are the numbers that James Cook is getting usually, or that you expect from a high-powered passing offense from a running back. They're not handing it off to him and just force-feeding him. He just churns it out in what ho-hum type fashion here. Like he's not flashy. He's not breaking off huge runs. He's not going for 50 yards, 40 yards, 30 yards. But when they need him, he can get the yardage and things like that. He's someone that they're going to have to be aware of here. They want to pass the ball more than they want to throw it, or they want to pass the ball more than they want to run it. Excuse me. But I just think that he's someone you have to watch. Beyond him, Samaje Perine is gone. The days of Giovanni Bernard are gone. There's no running back behind him that you need to worry about. It's right. Joe Mixon, and that's it.
All right, let's get to the game. Let's get to the numbers from BetMGM, John. Bills getting 2.5 in this game. I'm good with that. We'll get to what I think is going to happen in a bit, but plus 2.5, you don't see that with this Bills Josh Allen team, that they're getting points.
So that essentially means Vegas thinks they're even, but because it's in Cincinnati, they're going to give the home team, a field goal. That's kind of how this usually works. If it's even money for the home team, that means they kind of have more faith in the visitors. So I will not take the 2.5 though.
All right, over under 48.5. I have said that I will never take the over the rest of the year with how this NFL season is played out, but the viewer of football in me wants the over so bad in this, in a tight game, in an over game. So I'm going to go against my instincts and say 48.5. Give me the over in this one.
I'm going to take the under because I think it's going to be 48 on the money.
Wow.
So I'm going to take the under. I'm going to go 27-21 Cincinnati is what I'm going to go.
Okay, I'm going 31-27 Cincinnati, and we're both off the Bills. I think this is a first since we actually started doing the podcast that at least one of us wasn't going with the Bills in this. So it should be an interesting game. I just hope it's a good game, John. I mean, most of the NFL has looked like crap this year. Let's be honest. Officiating crap, plays crap, everything just crap all over the place.
I just got to say, the Bills have to show me at this point. It's so funny because for, as you said, years, I've seen enough from the Bills to believe. Do I think the Bills can beat the Bengals? 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But they haven't shown me enough. As encouraging as the offense looked for parts of the Buccaneers game, they still were tight at the end, right? And they didn't put them away and all of that stuff. And I'm just not just going to dismiss what looked better against Tampa Bay the previous 3 weeks before that. I think Cincinnati's defense, they got some good ends with Hendrickson and Hubbard as well. I think they can disrupt. I think their defense has some flaws as well. And I think the Bills can move the football on them. But I am concerned of maybe what the Bills defense can do stopping Burrow and those 3 receivers. I think it'll be their biggest test yet. And until they show it, I'm going to hedge a little bit and go with what I have seen so far, and that's Cincinnati being the better team.
Does Douglas play at all on Sunday night?
I think so. Because I think he's familiar enough with zone schemes to maybe they can make it work. And honestly, maybe they just feel like they have to, right?
That's the way I'm leaning, yeah.
And maybe it's a rotation. Maybe they don't say, hey, you got to play 100% of the snaps. Maybe they'll rotate with Dane or something like that. But I think you do see Rasul Douglas on the field in some capacity Sunday night.
All right. Well, you were sleeping Wednesday morning this week. The Raiders decided to start firing everyone, including head coach Josh McDaniels, John. To me, the right move. Josh McDaniels, I don't think is a head coach. I mean, your second go-around as head coach, worse than your first go-around, because he did okay in Denver at first, but then that fell apart. And so now he's done. The general manager is done. Jimmy Garoppolo is basically done. It's just a mess out there in Vegas.
It is. And are you surprised?
No.
I mean, Josh McDaniels is not a good head coach. He started like 6-0, and then he plummeted in Denver, and he is the coach of the Colts for 24 hours, and it's like, oh, I'd rather be an offensive coordinator, and that was a pretty crappy move there. And then it didn't work out in Vegas.
Does he go back to New England?
I mean, probably. Isn't that what everybody does?
I think
right?
That's what they all do who coached under Belichick.
But is that the right move for New England? Is it the right move for McDaniels? I mean, to me, this is all right, just be a coordinator because you're clearly not a good head coach. And for him, I think he needs to prove, well, it doesn't need to. I think he should prove that he could be a good offensive coordinator without the Patriots and certainly without Tom Brady.
I know. I saw something online today about without Tom Brady, Bill Belichick's offenses have stunk. Josh McDaniels' offenses have stunk. And then they threw in Brian Daboll. I get what's going on with the Giants right now, but you can't just lump Brian Daboll in with that.
No. Dave's had nothing to do with that. If you want to say Brian Daboll is not the same without Josh Allen, I would say no kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, who is going to be better with Daniel Jones versus Josh Allen? I think Dave's himself in an honest moment, maybe having a beverage or two, would say, well, of course things are more challenging as a coordinator and as a coach when you have Daniel Jones versus Josh Allen. But no, it is true though. The Belichick coaching tree, not great, Bob.
No, not great at all. First thing in the morning, hey, it's daylight savings this weekend. Get an extra hour of sleep. And still, when you wake up, Dolphins versus Chiefs over in Germany, John. And with your eye on the playoffs, who winning this game, and that is horrible English. Dolphins or Chiefs? What's better for the Bills? The Dolphins winning or the Chiefs winning? Because I go back and forth with this off the top of my head, just for the pure fact of, well, you want the Chiefs to win because the Bills are chasing the Dolphins in the AFC East. But then ultimately, you've been chasing the Chiefs for all these years, and you would rather get a home game if you had to play the Chiefs again. So I go back and forth on it. I have no answer, but off the top of my head, I'd say probably pick the Chiefs over the Dolphins.
Oh, you need the Dolphins to lose if you're the Bills, because the division is an automatic berth into the playoffs. At this point, am I threatened that the Bills would maybe lose out in the wild card to Pittsburgh, Cleveland, the Jets, Houston, Tennessee? No, not particularly, but don't think it's out of the realm of possibility the 3 and 4 Chargers could come up or someone could get hot or whatever it may be. You just have to get in and worry about it from there. So to me, it doesn't matter where Kansas City is in the playoff seedings if the Bills are 5, 6, 7 or out. So to me, the division is what matters most. It guarantees a home playoff game, at least one of them. So yes, Miami losing to the Chiefs is a far better outcome for the Bills than the other way around.
I got you. Now, the biggest story of the day, from what I've been told from what I've seen on my computer is simply this. Christmas music the day after Halloween, Jon. Is that too early? Because I say, you're dang right it's too early. Give me a break. Come on now. This is huge. Your opinion on this is huge.
Huge or huge?
Huge.
Okay. It is too early for me for Christmas music. I love Christmas music. I will say that. To me, I got to get to Thanksgiving. So my wife is huge into Halloween. She wants to put stuff up before September 1st. We've made a good compromise, and September 1st is usually it. So we've had Halloween decorations up for 2 months now.
That's a bit bananas.
I don't get personally into the Halloween-ish spirit or start drinking fall beers till mid-September after my birthday. So I kind of hold the same thing of, all right, other people could start getting into the Christmas stuff. I've noticed Christmas stuff in Target and Wegmans and all this stuff for weeks already. So I think that's a bit much. I won't start listening to it until Thanksgiving or so. But boy, do I love it, Kevin. I love it. Give me some Mariah Carey.
Oof.
Give me some of that NSYNC. Give me some Michael Bublé.
This is the age difference right here, because I'm still stuck and locked into MTV CD, A Very Special Christmas, that had Run DMC on it, Stevie Nicks on it, Bruce Springsteen on it, U2, The Eurythmics. I can listen to that after Thanksgiving, but all the newer Christmas stuff, like, I get it. When you start to get older, you have a cut line on when you want to listen to new music and when it's fine. I don't mind the Mariah Carey song, but it can get obnoxious to me after a while.
I'm all for it. I mean, to be honest, like a local radio station, what else are they playing that you're missing out on by hearing Christmas for a month extra?
Would it be cruel of me to say ask if there are still local radio stations? Would that be?
Oh, what are you bougie with your Sirius or something?
Yeah, I legit, other than sports radio, like music-wise, just, when we go golfing, it's all 90s all the time with me. That's it. Or early 2000s. Music, Christmas, or otherwise.
That's fine. A month from now, 3 weeks from now, I'll get into the Christmas vibe. It helps everyone get into the Christmas vibe when you get 3-4 inches of snow going from Halloween into November 1st. Boo!
Yeah, I'm with you. By the way, side note, my brother called me and said that my story last week of getting nervous playing around girls when I was younger playing sports was lame. So I have a microphone. Sean, you're a dork. Anyways, Jon, we have a game coming up. Bills, Bengals, biggest game of the year. Sunday Night Football once again. Buffalo End Zone Podcast coming your way the following morning after it's recorded at 2:30 a.m. Jon and I will be with you after the game as well with Fred Jackson as usual. As always, thanks for joining us, everyone.